Well, hello, Nativity Bible heads. It is time for Sunday morning Power Bible Study, and I am Dr. Wayne. And did I bring you the message this morning? Yes, I did. And I could not help but be the one to also teach you this wonderful lesson from the very last chapter of the book of Joshua. Now, I hope that you read my piece in the Nativity Scene, the monthly newsletter for November. There's a story arc going on, and it's about to come to a completion because Advent's going to start on the last Sunday of November. And then we begin a whole new arc. This season that we are in, after Pentecost, is a season of learning about the things that Jesus did and the things that Jesus said. Now, in the Old Testament track, we have this arc of the story of the entire narrative, if you will, of the Old Testament, from Abraham through Moses. Today we're going to finish Joshua. Next week it's Judges, and then we're going to be like at the end, okay? And then we start a whole new arc. Last week we were in the beginning of the book of Joshua when Joshua took over from Moses. Now, we were told very plainly that never was there another prophet like Moses. We were told that. And then Joshua takes the baton, like in a relay race. Joshua picks up the baton and he goes with it with all the authority of Moses. Now, this week we are in the very end of the book of Joshua. What has happened between the beginning and the end, which was last week and now this week, they have totally taken the land of Canaan, what had been called Canaan. It was called a lot of different things. But this chapter 24 is what we call, or what scholars call, the covenant renewal at Shechem. And what it does is it sets the tone for the future. Joshua, this is the end of the book of Joshua, Judges, and then 1st Samuel, 1st Kings. What happens is not good. One of the things that we got to keep in mind, one of the things we have to always keep in mind when we're reading the words of the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible, is that it is written with the perspective that they know how things are going to go. They're not going to go well. They know that they're not going to keep the covenant. They know that they're going to fail. They know that they're going to lose the land of promise. And what that means is, when we see these events, we see them from the perspective of, big commitment is also, when you fail in big commitment, you also get big, what is the word, punishment? I don't like that word, but it's like the bigger the game you play, the bigger, you've heard the expression, the higher they are, the farther they fall. Is that an expression? The bigger they are, the harder they fall. Something like that, right? This is kind of like what we see going on. Joshua, the book of Joshua, chapter 24. Now, I know that in our reading in our Sunday morning lectionary, it was only the first 2.5 verses, and then some more verses, but we're going to cover the whole chapter of Joshua, chapter 24. Like I said, it's the last chapter in Joshua, verse 1. Then Joshua gathered all the tribes of Israel to Shechem and summoned the elders, the heads, the judges, and the officers of Israel, and they presented themselves before God. Shechem. Shechem is a very key spot in the history of Israel. It was the first time, remember Abraham, okay? Abraham wasn't from there. Remember, he was from farther north, a land that they called at the time Aramea. That's one of the parts of the ancient confession. A wandering Aramaean was my ancestor. That's Abraham. He had Isaac, Jacob. Jacob is the one that got renamed Israel. That's when they moved to Egypt because of the famine. That's where they become enslaved. That's where God raised up Moses, liberated them through the wilderness, Mount Sinai, commandments. Then Moses dies on Mount Nebo. Then Moses dies. Joshua takes over. They enter the land of promise. And now, at the end of that book of Joshua, Joshua, the leader that took over for Moses, is leading a covenant renewal ceremony. It's a ceremony intended to paint the picture of, remember, everything we have written, the overall gloss, when I say gloss, I mean like the narrative, overall redaction is of the narrator knows how it's going to end, and it's going to end because of unfaithfulness. It's going to end badly, but the narrator wants to make sure that we are aware that the commitment that they had, it was pure, it was sincere, it was valid, it was awesome, it was something that we can only wish to aspire to. This chapter 24, and the words in it, I can remember sermons about this chapter, and from preachers saying, "Choose ye this day whom you will serve." And anyway, we'll get to that, but here we go. That's what the Shechem, that's where I took off here. Shechem, that is a significant liturgical space in the life of Israel. That is the place that God first spoke to Abraham when Abraham was in the land of Canaan. Then Joshua gathered all the tribes of Israel to Shechem and summoned the elders, the heads, the judges, and the officers of it, and they presented themselves before God. Notice it's not the covenant name for God, it's just Elohim, deity, God. Verse 2, and Joshua said to all the people, "Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel." Now, when Joshua speaks like this, he's speaking as a prophet, not just a prophet, but the prophet, the idea that he is the one conveying to the people the words of the Lord. Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, long ago, and he's going to recount a history, okay? One of the key moments in covenant renewal is a recounting of the wonderful deeds, the history of, oh, these are the things that your God has done for you. It is something that we as priests every Sunday when we are celebrating Eucharist and we recount a Eucharistic prayer. This last Sunday, the previous Sunday, the All Saints Sunday, November 1st, you heard Eucharistic prayer D, contained a very complete, not even shorthand at all, very long history of, oh, this is what God has done for you. And it recounted all of those deeds. This is a very important element in the worship of God, that we recount the deeds that God has done for us. And it is very instructive as well in how, oh, were you ever wondering how, how do I convey to somebody else how important God has been for me? How you do it is you recount what God has done for you. This is the nature of testimony. This is the nature of witness. This is also the nature of that E word, evangelism. Okay, so verse 2. And Joshua said to all the people, "Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, long ago, your ancestors, Terah and his sons, Abraham and Nahor." We don't often hear about Abraham's dad, who was Terah, or his brother, Nahor, because we know mostly about Abraham. "Lived beyond the Euphrates and served other gods." The Euphrates is that, those rivers from the far north, present day like Iraq-ish. Verse 3. "Then I took your father Abraham from beyond the river and led him through all the land of Canaan and made his offspring many." Notice the first person. Notice that God is saying very resolutely, very clearly, this is what I have done, okay? We've had already, remember this is the end of the book of Joshua, the 6th book of the Bible. We've had many stories of Moses bartering with God, arguing even with God. God saying, "Those people that you brought out," and Moses is like, "Wait a second, no. Your people, which you brought out, it is important that we get that here God is taking ownership of the fact that these people are his, okay, are his possession. The last sentence in verse 1 is where our passage that we heard in our lectionary readings this morning, that's where that ended. And then it doesn't pick up again until like verse 13 or 14. But we're going to go through all this because this is very instructive in the way Old Testament faith, the Hebrew Bible, the Bible of Jesus, the Bible of the earliest Christians, the earliest church, expressed their faith in God, okay? The last sentence of verse 3 continues with a sentence in verse 4. "I gave him Isaac, and to Isaac I gave Jacob and Esau. I gave Esau the hill country of Seir to possess, but Jacob and his children went down to Egypt." Esau and Seir, that's the region of Moab. That's the tradition that Esau, even though he lost his birthright, he didn't lose, he didn't die, and he did succeed in having a land. But it just wasn't the land of promise. Verse 5, "Then I sent Moses and Aaron," they were brothers, remember, "and I plagued Egypt." Notice all of these statements are in the first person, singular. Joshua is the one speaking these words. And it's important this way because there's it's as though it's like God is owning these deeds, these wondrous deeds. Very important. God didn't always do this with Moses. All right? And to Moses, verse 4, verse 5. "Then I sent Moses and Aaron, and I plagued Egypt with what I did in its midst. And afterwards I brought you out." Very emphatic on the fact that this is the Lord making a claim on these people. Verse 6, we are in Joshua chapter 4, verse 6. "When I brought your ancestors out of Egypt, you came to the sea, and the Egyptians pursued your ancestors with chariots and horsemen to the Red Sea." We know about this story, the miraculous crossing of the water, right? Verse 7, "When they cried out to the Lord, he put darkness between you and the Egyptians and made the sea come upon them and cover them, and your eyes saw what I did to Egypt." That's the thing about all of the Pharaoh's chariots and his horsemen washing up on the shore. Something that we read about with our Easter vigil stories, yes? Afterwards, you lived in the wilderness a long time. Just one sentence. One sentence. Isn't that awesome? Look at that. Just one sentence summarizes basically everything that happens. Notice it doesn't mention anything about Mount Sinai, the giving of the law, the Ten Commandments. So that happens in the second half of Exodus. And then Leviticus, Numbers, and then Deuteronomy, which is the entire recounting of all that. Oh, just summarized in one sentence. One sentence. Afterwards, you lived in the wilderness a long time. Verse 8, then I brought you to the land of the Amorites who lived on the other side of the Jordan. They fought with you, and I handed them over to you, and you took possession of their land, and I destroyed them before you. That is all a summary of the book of Joshua, those chapters that we didn't read. Last week we read Joshua chapter 3. This is chapter 24. All of that stuff between 3 and 24, that was that. That's a summary of that. Verse 9, then King Balak, son of Zippor of Moab, set out to fight against Israel. He sent and invited Balaam, son of Beor, to curse you, but I would not listen to Balaam. Therefore he blessed you, so I rescued you out of his hand. That is a reference to the talking donkey incident, and we don't have time to go into the talking donkey incident. I hope that you've been, we're paying attention when we studied that on Bible Study Wednesday. But Balaam's ass, Balaam's donkey, he gets into an argument with it. It's quite a colorful story in the book of Numbers. But anyway, the Lord is touting the things that he has done for his people. Verse 11, when you went over the Jordan and came to Jericho. When you went over the Jordan, that was last week's lesson, right? Remember the Ark of the Covenant, the priests. When their feet touched the waters stacked up on one side, created a dry land for them to walk through. The crossing over, remember that? When you went over the Jordan and came to Jericho, the citizens of Jericho fought against you. And also the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Canaanites, and the Hittites, the Girgashites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, and I handed them over to you. This is all a very summary way of describing everything, quite frankly, that happens in Joshua from chapters 4 through 23. Yeah, there are formulaic sayings of the people who inhabited the land. And like I said last week, I want you to remember this. It is not as though the land of Canaan were a place where everything was like clearly defined. Everything was in flux. The movement of the Israelites into Canaan, it wasn't a land grab. It wasn't even like when the United States, when the people who were fleeing from England came to this continent and pushed the Indians out. It's not even that same thing. Things were in flux, big time flux. It's always portrayed as a gift that those who had no land get land. There's no thought of, well, who deserves the land? To whom does the land belong to? None of those are questions that even get asked. Okay. Verse 12. I sent the hornet ahead of you, which drove out before you the two kings of the Amorites. It was not by your sword or by your bow. I gave you a land in which you had not labored, and towns that you had not built, and you live in them. You eat the fruit of vineyards and olive yards that you did not plant. All of that. God is, it's like, remember this coming out of the mouth of Joshua, but God is saying, I've been very gracious to you. I have given you stuff you didn't deserve, that you didn't work for, that you didn't earn, but you got it anyway. Very important. This is about what God has done. Verse 14, now we're going to get back into the passage, the part of the passage that we heard in our morning worship. Now, therefore, revere the Lord and serve him in sincerity and in faithfulness. Put away the gods that your ancestors served beyond the river and in Egypt, and serve the Lord. So Abraham, before he came south, put away the gods. That's what Abraham did. He put away those gods of his fathers. And then when they were in Egypt, there were gods of Egypt. Put those away, those on the fringes, and serve the Lord. The Lord is the God that Moses revealed to them with the law from Mount Sinai. Verse 15, Joshua chapter 24, verse 15. Now, if you are unwilling to serve the Lord, choose this day. If you're unwilling, choose. You're not willing? Okay, fine. I don't care. Choose. You got to choose. You got to choose. Choose this day whom you will serve, whether the gods your ancestors served in the region beyond the river or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you are living. But as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord. This is a very key thing. Remember I told you about the Baptist preaching I heard when I was a kid? Preachers would say, as for me and my family, we will serve the Lord. How will you serve the Lord? What will you do to make sure that your families serves the Lord? These are things that people say. Okay, I got to finish this up in 8.5 minutes. Let's go. Verse 16, for the people answered, far be it from us that we should forsake the Lord to serve other gods. It's like, for it is the Lord our God who brought us and our ancestors up from the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery, and who did those great things in our sight. He protected us along the way that we went, and among all the peoples through whom we passed. And the Lord drove out before us the peoples, the Amorites, who lived in the land. Therefore, we also will serve the Lord, for he is our God. Okay, this reference to the Amorites, they were an ancient possessor of that land of Canaan. We're used to hearing Canaanites. Amorites was just one of those peoples that lived in the area, an older word for the land. Don't let that cause you any consternation. But notice that in response to Joshua saying, as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord, they're saying, yeah, we're going to serve the Lord too. We're going to totally do it. But look what Joshua says in retort in verse 9. But Joshua said to the people, verse 19, you cannot serve the Lord, for he is a holy God. He is a jealous God. He will not forgive your transgressions or your sins. If you forsake the Lord and serve foreign gods, then he will turn and do you harm and consume you after having done you good. He's saying like, you don't know, okay, yes, I heard what you said, but you're playing with fire here. The Lord, this Lord, the one that brought you out, is not gonna play nice with the way you've been playing with him, okay? This isn't just any God. Other gods were not jealous or even zealous. Zealous is actually a better word than jealous. Other gods were like, oh, well, we're just glad that they're serving us. This God is like, no, I demand your total loyalty. There was no other God like that. This was one of the unique things about Israel's faith, is that the Lord, Yahweh, there wasn't anybody else like Yahweh. Yahweh was a zealous, jealous God who demanded unforsaken loyalty. Verse 19. You cannot serve the Lord, for he's a holy God, he's a jealous God, he will not forget. If you forsake serve foreign God, then he will turn you to your arm. Verse 21. Okay, I read that. 21, Joshua 24, verse 21. And the people said to Joshua, no, we will serve the Lord. Remember, all of this is written, the final redaction of this is after the end, which is after they proved that they couldn't serve the Lord, and they didn't serve the Lord. And they did go back to their old gods. Verse 22. Then Joshua said to the people, you are witnesses against yourselves that you have chosen the Lord to serve him? And they said, we are witnesses. It's like, okay, you said it. Yes, we said it. Verse 23, he said, then put away the foreign gods that are among you. As they said that, they still had foreign gods amongst them. So they're saying, oh yeah, we're going to serve this God, while they already had these other. Put away the foreign gods that are among you and incline your hearts to the Lord, the God of Israel. The people said to Joshua, verse 24, this is Joshua 24, verse 24, the Lord our God we will serve, and him we will obey. So Joshua made a covenant with the people that day and made statutes and ordinances for them at Shechem. So it's like Joshua's like, okay, we've gone through this. You said what you said. I said you can't do that. And they're saying, oh yeah, but we will. And we're going to do that. Okay, your word is what I'm taking. I'm taking your word. This is what your word was. I'm just going to like, okay, I hear your word. I'm not going to say, you have no idea what you're saying. I've already said that. We're going to just move on. Verse 25 concludes it. So Joshua made a covenant with the people that day and made statutes and ordinances for them at Shechem. Joshua wrote these words, verse 26. Joshua wrote these words in the book of the law of God, and he took a large stone and set it up there under the oak in the sanctuary of the Lord. Joshua said to all the people, see, this stone shall be a witness against us, for it has heard all the words of the Lord that he spoke to us. Therefore, it shall be a witness against you if you deal falsely with your God. So Joshua sent the people away to their inheritances. So this is a big deal. This covenant renewal ceremony at Shechem sets the people off. And this is the last chapter of the book of Joshua. What's coming up? The book of Judges. Judges is a real weird book. We're going to see a story from the judge Deborah next week. But look at this. Verse 29. We're going to finish off this chapter. After these things, Joshua, son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, he died. Being 110 years old, we are not anyway surprised that it's 10 years less than Moses. It's a multiple of 10. Symbolic numbers. Figure it out. Verse 30. They buried him in his own inheritance at Timnath-Serah, which is in the hill country of Ephraim, north of Mount Gaash. Israel served the Lord all the days of Joshua and all the days of the elders who outlived Joshua and had known all the work that the Lord did for Israel. The bones of Joseph, which the Israelites had brought up from Egypt, were buried at Shechem. That's where they did that covenant renewal ceremony. In the portion of ground that Jacob had bought from the children of Hamor, the father of Shechem, 100 pieces of it became an inheritance of the descendants of Joseph. Verse 33, Eleazar, son of Aaron, died. Who was Aaron? Aaron was Moses' brother. So Eleazar was a nephew of Moses. Eleazar, son of Aaron, died, and they buried him at Gibeah, the town of his son Phinehas, which had been given him in the hill country of Ephraim. That's the last words of the book of Joshua. Remember, the overall narrative of the Old Testament knows how things go. They don't end well. They will end with the people having failed to keep their promise, the one that they made here in chapter 24 of the book of Joshua. And they are faced with, how do we know that the Lord is still our God? The story of the Bible, especially when we talk about the Old Testament, is a story of God continually reaching out toward his people. Reaching toward them, despite the fact that they continue to turn their back on him. God continues to reach toward them, even though it looks like, oh, the Lord our God has forsaken us. Whatever that seeming is, it's just temporary. So next week, like I said, we're going to take a sample out of the book of Judges, and we're going to see the sample of like what happened during this next period of Israel's history as we look forward to the completion of this story arc, if you will. And spoiler alert, Jesus plays a big part in it. Blessings on your day.